Welcome to Indy Period, powered by Your Time Network. One topic, one perspective, a deeper look at the conversation shaping sports. We're talking the headlines, the strategy, leadership, front office decisions, college athletics, pro sports, and the media narratives. We'll tell you where we agree and where we disagree, but most importantly, why. Because the game deserves more than a reaction, it deserves a perspective. You're now watching Indy Period. Here, man. Here we are, man. The age long question of Tennessee State. Uh, a lot of fans have thoughts on them leaving the OVC for what most would say the SWAC, some would say the MEAC. But let's really start this by asking some really good questions on this. Should TSU truly lead the OVC for the SWAC or the MEAC? Welcome to Your Time Network, your home for both sports, culture, and inspiration. Catch the excitement with Upper Radio Show, where we bring the energy of TSU sports to life. Dive deeper with Legends Unleashed, the intimate stories from the icons and trailblazers in sports. And join Indy Period, where we go one-to-one and we slow down, break down the biggest sports media conversations, and bring you a fresh perspective. Subscribe now and make your time count. Um, I would say the stronger executive level question is which conference platform best converts Tennessee State's HBCU brand? When you're thinking about the Nashville market position, its football history, the alumni culture, and sponsorship potentials into this highest long-term value. So you really have to think about it from that lens, not just a blanket. Let's go to this conference. Let's stay in this conference, right? Right. It's about separating the emotion from the business viability. There's a lot of us that from conversations that I would say are just so emotionally in that thought process. Now, as me calling them out by being emotional, it's not that they're wrong. Okay. I think that emotion drives them to want to see something different and something what they from their own experiences would say is better. So I'm not gonna shush that away. I think that is spot on, but you're also missing the business viability. So making sure that what you're doing truly does check uh, the boxes from a business standpoint, right? So as you research TSU, right, TSU joins the OVC as a founding member. I'm not sure if founding member, but just back in the late 1980s, when you research it on TSU Tigers website, the basketball program joined, I believe, let's see here, 1987, 1988, on that time frame. While from there, I think football and the rest of the sports followed in that fall of '88 or whatever there, man. But so for me, it's about this, right? We have to really look at this in the right lens, right? So I'm gonna pull up a document here. Let's first look at this from the conference financial comparisons, right? So I think it's important that we look at this from how um, this thing plays out, right? So when you're looking at this, we're talking about the revenue on this. Here's the most important public financial. I want you to know this. This is all public financial snapshots from the latest available reporting, nonprofit filing summaries from the SWAC, the MEAC, the OVC, all that there right there. So you all know I'm citing my sources on this. I pulled it from there. Um, you know, in a nutshell, right? The public filing shows SWAC with the largest total revenue and asset base, and then MEAC ahead of the OVC in total revenue, and obviously OVC at the lowest end. This is as of fiscal year 2025 revenue among the three. As we're looking at this document, right? It's a lot to look into from what their conference employees basis look like, right? And again, this is the best of what I can find. So if some of that stuff like as we're sitting here is not fully there, but it's my best research on said information. But what I do know is, again, this is all what's reported. uh you know you know Fiscal year 2025 revenue, as we're looking at this, OVC, revenue was 11 million, their expenses were 16 million, right? And then you see where they are on total assets, and then you look at the SWAC and what it does in their space, right? So 25 in revenue, 21 million in expenses, and then their assets, 22. So the MEAC, their revenue is higher than their expenses. OVC is the exact opposite. So, as you're looking at this, I mean, it's going to begin to tell, some more stories for us as we're looking at this. I want to also call out that, as we're looking at sports sponsorship media signals, that plays a role in it as well too. So on the screen right there, OVC, a Learfield sponsorship structure with ESPN Plus packaging. It positions them a little better than the SWAC and MEAC, all because of just it's simple that the ESPN has just a stronger bandwidth compared to some of the other great. I would say the best option out there for just strictly HBCU is HBCU Go TV. Phenomenal space, phenomenal network and building there by some guys there. Love what they're doing. Okay. Uh, so that's the revenue mix that matters right there, right? So that's just as we're looking at it from that standpoint, right? So and what this really highlights, right? So let's take this, let's go pull this down here. Let's pull up another one here. We're now going to look at the football attendance comparison, right? So we're going to really dive into this, okay? Let me pull this up. Boom, here we go. There we are. All right. So, for me, and I'm gonna reread this one more time to you. If you say to me, this is what's clear. The argument is fan culture, game day demand, HBCU football atmosphere. The SWAC is just ahead, and it is no doubt about it. Right? It is materially ahead as well too. The MEAC is also ahead of the OVC Big South football attendance model, right? The question becomes whether that attendance advantage turns into enough net revenue for TSU, right? So this brings us into that bridge of the previous slide we were looking at too, right? So now we're into this new one on the conversation. All right. Um, the OVC has a real infrastructure to it because it's tied to ESPN media rights relationship. That's including newer 6-year agreement announced from the OVC doing that in 2025 with hundreds of annual events across ESPN platforms. So that plays a heavy role in what it does as well too, right? So that means if I'm reading that correctly, that's talking about more than just your football. That's the other sports that gets coverage as well too through ESPN Plus and its media rights. Um, all right. So again, as we're looking at this, this is again, we have to look at this from a lens of just strictly, as we said in the beginning, what's the business viability, right? So that's where we are from the OVC on it. As I'm reading some more of these notes, OVC is reporting around the agreement described at least 725 events per school year on ESPN Plus. Select that's a lot of linear opportunities for the athletic teams within that institution of the OVC, right? The OVC also has Learfield back sponsorship structure through the OVC Sports Properties, which oversees championship sponsorships, official category rights, the OVC marks, signage, hospitality, TV inventory, all of its website advertising and digital inventory. So you have those spaces right there, right? OVC value proposition, it talks through their media volume, their operational stability, ESPN Plus inventory, as I just said, Lear Field sponsorship packaging and regional travel logic, right? There's still more to be uncovered from that because that's what your value proposition says. I didn't have enough time to really do a true deep dive on the analytics of that value proposition. Again, that is stuff that the OVC has to report out, and you got to really go out there and just really have a connection with them to figure out on that stuff right there. But then that's the OVC. For me, I would say the OVC weakness would be the football demand, the energy around it. It's just on screen right here. It's just clearly much lower than the SWAC and the MEAC in their football environments, man. So it's a lot to maneuver and take in from there. With the SWAC on the screen right there, I mean, the SWAC strongest commercial story among so the SWAC has the strongest commercial story among all three conferences, right? Their FY25 revenue was more than double the OVC's, and as a major brand partnerships, right? So you're talking, I believe their biggest one might be Delta Airlines, right? I think they got some PepsiCo in there as well too. So, that's where they are, and these are big, big brands, right? The Olympic sports and the esports. And this was a deal that I believe that was done a few years back as well too for them. And I think this deal is going to extend. I don't think this deal with the swag is going to end until like 2029. So that's where they are. Also with their celebration bowl alongside the MEAC, they have cricket. Cricket is a big, as we know, telecommunications company as well too. So what's strong for the SWAC's proposition is football attendance. It's not even close. Highest conference revenue, strongest cultural sponsorship platform, which plays a role, right? So this is different than the standard business model of what OVC has with ESPN, right? So this speaks to a different level of what uh, the bulk of the fandom tied to Tennessee State is leaning into. So it's duly noted right there. So good notes right there. ESPN event exposure still as well too. So they still have some level of ESPN support, and then just natural rivalry inventory. As we're talking about this, right? The biggest thing that's a weakness of the OVC is, and I'm going to quote my brother on this from another mother, man. We call him BA, man, Gerald Cook. It is you got kids who and they're making emotional decisions. It happens. A portion of that is in their decision of what school they go to. It doesn't matter, right? Kids go to these big Power Four schools because they walk inside these stadiums and it's 100,000 people cheering them on, right? And it's like every week they have anywhere from 80,000 to 100,000 watching them, right? So that plays a role in the emotion. So you got to lean into that. So he's right in that effort. So shout out to Cook on that, man. The weakness would be um, the Tennessee State has been in this OVC model for quite some time. So away game travel could play negative towards it, right? The travel really extends right now. In the traditional OVC, it was basically you were driving no more than 2 hours for the most part, 2 games. You had Western Kentucky, you had Eastern Kentucky, Murray State is in Kentucky as well too. Was probably like the longest drive for a minute there. Tennessee Tech, which is in Cookville between Nashville and Knoxville. UT Martin's in Tennessee, which is just north of Jackson. You had Sanford, which is in Birmingham, Alabama. You got Jacksonville State, which is just outside of Birmingham. It's either outside of Birmingham, right inside Birmingham, but right. So it's like you have all this proximity to you, right? And it makes things easier. Not to mention MTSU used to be in the OVC. Uh, so, so from a drivability standpoint, in your home base, it made it easier for those folks to pick up and go, right? But as things evolved, a lot plays into the attendance of a TSU game. Um, and I'll get into that, but let me finish up with this MEAC portion of this as well too. So we just talked about, a potential weakness within, a move to the SWAC and what that looks like, right? Outside of the cost of leaving the OVC and then the cost of paying to get into the SWAC, right? All of that stuff right there. The MEAC is a smaller conference than the SWAC, but still has a meaningful HBCU national platform, and they still outperform the OVC. So that's duly noted on there. MEAC also shares ESPN events ecosystem through the MEAC Swag Challenge and a Celebration Bowl. So those both tied to Cricket Wireless, right? So we talked about that, and that sponsorship ends in 2027. So for me, the MEAC's proposition is around it's alignment of the East Coast institutional fit. It brings into some more national event viability, visibility into what TSU might like. I mean, there are some things to consider about alumni bases as well too. So, does Tennessee State have some alumni bases in some of those MEAC cities? That's a thing to consider. We know I didn't mention this in the SWAC segment of this, but we know that Tennessee State has some strong uh, portions in some of the SWAC um, demographics as well too. So the weakness is just smaller football membership, less overall revenue than the SWAC, but still more than the OVC. But obviously, still has the obvious football demand upside, and still just good football. All right. So now, before we go into my next thing about the OVC, I was going to dive into the portion of you know Tennessee State and why it originally was an independent university and stepped into the OVC. So it was independent, playing a majority. It was a black college schedule. They were playing some SWAC schools, they're playing some MEAC schools, right? So you were playing a combination of both, and then still throwing in your occasional, you know, I would say at the time a group of five style school, like a University of Louisville, them teams like that, right? You were throwing in some of those from time to time as you were still playing your traditional schedule. So you step into the OEC, right? The big kicker is, which this will be a totally different show where we'll discuss this, but you step into the OVC and your your production of what you produced on the field slowly started to drain, right? So the product of what you saw was slowly draining out. And Tennessee State, from what I've watched as a former player, and then what I've seen as a kid growing up in Nashville, and then talking to former players and alumni in the space, you know, we feel, and I'm going to say we on this because I'm a part of this, whether I want to be or not, even though it's not my actions, but as an alumni, I still got to claim it. So I'm not going to separate from it. Um, we fell into the status quo of how we do things. So you step into the OVC, and the thought process was, okay, you have Tennessee State, a strong football brand that has, by that time, you're talking 80 plus players drafted into the NFL. By that time, you've had already 5 first-round draft picks, 1 number 1 overall draft pick in Ed Too Tall Jones. In that same draft, Wayman Bryant gets drafted 4th overall to Chicago Bears. So you've had all of this. You've had, by this time, you're talking Richard Dent winning Super Bowl MVP with Chicago Bears as a defensive player, one of the earliest ones, if not first ones, but one of the earliest ones to complete that feat, right? So that says a lot, right? So you're stepping to the thought process is everyone would rise off the wave of Tennessee State because Tennessee State is rocking and rolling, right? But from that point on, you switch up your schedule and you're not playing as many of the teams you used to play. Things start to switch, and your just production slowly starts to dwindle down what you see on the field, right? And I think that has to play a role in folks wanting to come out. When you're used to a program that is winning 9, 10 games a year, and then you fall into these lows of, okay, we won 5 games, won 4 games, right? You know, you're still playing a lot of your traditional rivals, but you're not really beating them, right? Things get different in that aspect. And by this time, you're now stepping into uh the mid 90s, and it's just been a struggle since we've stepped into this OVC. We've had our legendary head coach, Coach John Merritt, passes away, and that whole transition was the catalyst of how things started to just not click consistently anymore. So you go from there, and then you find yourself into the late 90s under great head coach LC Cole. Things get turned around. You're winning, and then you step into 1999 and you move into a new stadium with the Tennessee Titans in downtown Nashville. So you leave your campus, boom, right? So that's the other caveat to this, right? So now you're no longer on campus, so the opportunity to truly make monies has left you because even if at our best, and I've done my best to research this as well too. Even at our best, Tennessee State, um, Tennessee State on an average Saturday, was probably looking or somewhere around 10,000, 15,000 fans at best anyways, right? So if that's what your average is, then, would it truly in the long run make sense to truly submit yourself in a stadium that has 77,000 seats, right? So even at your best on a game to game basis, if that's what you're looking at, then, you know, that just probably when probably that just we know that just wasn't a good, thought process on that, right? But here we are. So you step into this whole situation, and now you get caught into these lows of playing inside an NFL stadium. Which as a person, I was the one. My years we played in that stadium that they currently play in now in downtown Nashville, Nissan Stadium, which was once Adelphia Coliseum, right? So you played in that, and it looked good on homecoming when you got 45,000 there. It looks good John Mayer Classic when you got 40,000 there, right? But then you play the conference games, it's back down to less than 10,000, some less than 5,000. It just depends, And we're talking in 1999, a team, OVC championship team that finishes number one in the nation, and you're still, you know, getting the crowd participation of what you still get anyways still then. So right. So for me, it was is to tie all this stuff up, right? It's about getting to the point to where the decision making that we've done. All right. So let me pause there. And let's get back into it, right? So now the OVC and its exit costs, right? This whole buyout, right? This and what this research looks like, and I want to make sure I'm careful on this because the true details are internally tied to what the athletic institution chooses to do when they have that conversation with the OVC. What I can tell you in 2021, the OVC legal filing against Jacksonville State laid out the OVC's then existing exit structure, right? So according to that filing, a departing school owed, in that scenario, a minimum of 2 years notice and a $750,000 fee to exit, right? Less than 2 years, you're talking about $1 million buyout. Additional impact could be forfeiture of certain conference distributions, basketball pool distributions, pro rata conference fund balance, right? So all of that stuff plays into that when you're making this financial decision, right? And if you're in a financial decision where you're already not making money to begin with, right? So when our leadership, uh, because making a conference move is not just the athletic director's choice. That is a choice an athletic director has to have with their provost, their chancellor, their president, whoever they do this at each institution. So it's a combination of those. They ultimately are the deciding factors of that, right? And the last name that's signed on that document is going to be that university's, you know, highest tiered person, more than likely the president, if not the chancellor, depending on how they're set up. So that's where we're on that. So the filing also stated that 50% of the exit fee was due at departure, with the remainder due within 12 months. So you officially depart on January 1, and that means by January 1 of the next year, the rest of that money has to be there, right? So so that's where we are. So however, there is a major current caveat, and I want to say this that as I did some more research on this, in November 25, the OVC announced bylaw changes designed to strengthen the exit terms of departing members, right? So the public announcement did not disclose the fee amount, but for me, this is what I would understand this to be. The last clearly public OVC exit structure showed $750,000 exit fee with a proper notice and a $1 million without proper notice, and plus the loss of distributions. But because the OVC strengthened its exit terms in 25, TSU would need the current bylaws before anyone could, responsibly state the exact number. But for me, the scenario would be this: I would, in a planning estimate of this, without seeing what the bylaws report really are once you leave the OVC, I would risk it at the highest case possible. So potentially $2 million plus after you review the updated bylaws, looking at lost distributions, legal and admin costs, because that's going to be added into that as well too. So it's like it is not as simple as, hey, you all, we're going to leave and we're just going to just pay you out however when we can pay you out, right? So that is takes us back to the beginning of this. It is the business conversation. We have to understand where this propels us to. We have to understand that the AD, the president, they have to still make physically responsible decisions. And again, as emotionally as supporters are of TSU athletics, emotion is not going to pay the bill. So we've said that, right? And then you look into this other thing, right? So once you buy out of a conference, now you're potentially looking at a buy-in cost, right? So buy-in costs, like, so it's like it is you potentially it could cost you $2 million when it's all said and done to leave the OVC, and then you got to step into either the MEAC or the SWAC. And again, these are from the numbers I could find. MEAC's joining fees roughly about $250,000, but again, that was the MEAC allowing a Division II school to move up at that price. So I would assume if Tennessee State was to join the MEAC, it would be somewhere around like that $750,000 price. I would assume that. But more to come on that. The SWAC, I could not find a reliable current public source disclosing a fixed SWAC full membership interest fee. But what I can say is that interest cost is probably somewhere in that ballpark of what you saw with the MEAC. Probably somewhere around there. Maybe higher because SWAC's value is higher than MEAC's value. So assume that cost of moving there would be higher. So probably around the $1 million range, right? And that probably doesn't include legal fees and processing as well too. So that means any serious TSU conversation would require direct confirmation from those conference offices, the university, and the board level documents, right? So like all of that stuff has to play out, right? So outside of your emotion and where we are with this, and we want it to be in these situations, right? The business viability says it's not that simple, and it's going to take a different thought process and workaround to get there. Okay. Now I want to move into marketing and social media activity. You know, the OVC's media package with Learfield, as I discussed, it's strong in what it does, but less cultural pull in the football space. This is where I try my best to find social media hits from the conferences and what they present out there, but I couldn't find a direct analytic report on it. Literally, I would have to find a way to get access to all those conferences and inside analytics reports, and rightfully so, they're not just going to share their inside analytics reports on this stuff, right? So, in my best understanding of it, I could see that the SWAC is a little stronger in its promotion of their athletic institutions compared to the MEAC and the OVC. That's what we have there. Also, what I can verify is that conference revenue, sponsorship infrastructures, media partnerships, and attendance. You know, but monthly and social media output is not just cleanly published in a way that should be stated as a fact without content audit, right? So I just talked about that. I mean, just that's just kind of where we are. I mean, but I would say this. I would ask folks who are watching, reviewing this show, I want you to knock it out in the comments for me. But really look into what these conferences are doing for their sports from a visibility standpoint. Beyond just the contracts, but what are they doing in their websites and their social medias right there from there. So the strategic viability test for TSU, as we want to walk through this. Um, the executive lens would say I would use before saying TSU should move anywhere. The 5 questions TSU has to answer. Question one, all right, and I want you all who are watching this answer this in the comment section for me as well too. Does the new conference create more of a revenue? All right, and I'm not just talking gross excitement, right? I'm not talking vibes. I'm talking real net dollars. That means uh, does ticket sales lift? Okay. Does sponsorship lift? Does donor lift? Does media exposure lift? Travel costs increase or does it decrease? Questions. Exit fees, entry fees, lost OVC distributions, scheduling impact, recruiting impact, right? Answer those questions, right? Let's look at that. All right. Question number two: Does it improve TSU's brand position nationally? You know, the SWAC likely gives TSU more HBCU football energy. The MEAC gives HBCU alignment with the smaller conference model. The OVC gives, as we talked about, the ESPN Plus inventory, but not the same cultural resonance. We're trying to find that happy space in here, right? If you're trying to follow me along in this diatribe that I've been on, it's trying to follow that conversation there. Where are we going to be? Okay. Does it help football recruiting? If TSU can tell recruits they are playing in a conference with bigger crowds, bigger HBCU rivalries, and more cultural relevant games, that matters. Again, I reference my good friend, my brother, Gerald Cook. He's had some kids who've committed to, some Jackson States and some other schools, and they took visits to Tennessee States, and ultimately they were like, I went to these two different games in this SWAC and these two games in this MEAC, and it was still a big game, right? And outside of Tennessee State, your biggest games are who when you play another HBCU. Okay. Next question, question number four: Does it help the full athletic department? This cannot be just a football only thing, right? So when the athletic director, when the president makes this decision, they're not just going to say, all right, we're doing this because football needs this and football only needs this. What does this do for basketball? What does this do for volleyball? What does it do for track and field, softball, tennis, golf? You know, travel, missed time, class time, right? So all of this stuff, because as you step into a different conference that has much longer away points, that matters to your student base, right? So that's more time away, and more time to figure out the budgeting of it in that space as well too. So again, the emotional side says yes, we got to leave the OVC. You know, the business viability side says we have to be physically sound first, and we got to make sure that we're not making an emotional decision, but we recognize the emotion. Okay, so we are. Question five: Can TSU monetize Nashville better than the conference can monetize TSU? Right. So to me, this is the big one that I believe we need to cover. TSU brings a Nashville market. No other school in the SWAC or the MEAC has a TSU market at all right now. You have Texas Southern that's in Houston, but Houston's been Houston for quite some time, right? And Prairie View, I believe they're outside of Dallas. So Dallas has been Dallas for quite some time. Okay. But TSU has an it city, a top three growing market right now. Okay. We got HBCU legacy. We got the AOB, the aristocrat of bands. We got John Merritt's coach, John Merritt's history, NFL city proximity, right? So we have that, right? Who else has that? Texas Southern, they're in there, Prairie View, right? So those are two cities I already named. So they have that. And I'll say obviously Howard up in DC, they got the commanders where they are. But alumni passion, corporate sponsorship access. And when we say access, what does the true corporate sponsorship access look like for TSU to monetize it in its own space? Because it's there. It is clearly here in Nashville. If you look at any business journal out there, Nashville's business market from beyond the larger healthcare space, but tech is here. Hospitality's been here, but healthcare and tech have blown up here. Media storytelling, cultural tourism is a great opportunity as well too, and then classic game potential. Uh, these are not small assets. TSU should not enter any conference as a passive member, and I'm saying that wholeheartedly. And this is the conversation I've had offline with so many people. Like, I do not want any move that Tennessee State makes to be from a position of weakness and passive, right? When you make this move, it needs to be from a position of you got control of yourself. You're in a position of power, right? So we're going to get into how we do that. So TSU enter as a market maker. That's what TSU wants to do, right? So that's when I take away when you want to combine the emotion and the business viability, that's where this gets us at, right? It's the ability to understand who you are as an institution, as an athletic institution, and to be that. And how do you prep yourselves and execute on that? All right. So, this is kind of where we are on this segment here. Let me get to my strongest position, on this. Um, as I read this out, my professional read on this is the SWAC has the highest upside. The attendance, sponsorship energy, cultural relevance, HBCU football ecosystem are materially stronger. The OVC has has the lowest distribution. It gives TSU a known operating model, ESPN Plus, an existing league infrastructure, right? So that's that. The MEAC would probably be like a middle path. It gives TSU HBCU alignment, but not the same football commercial force as a SWAC. The ideal move may be a phase strategy on this stuff. But you know, let's get into this, man. So um I'm gonna get ready to close this out. But as I close this out, I'm gonna preface this by saying, all of this comes from love and I'm looking at emotion and I'm looking at business viability, right? So the things that I'm gonna, as I close this out, are tied towards that. It's tied towards a standard of execution of what we say we want to do at Tennessee State. When I was there, it was think, work, serve. So let's think about it, let's work on it, and let's go get it done. So for me, here's my closing monologue. Control the controllables. This is something that I was taught in every sport. And what you do, you control what you can simply control. Now, after looking at all of the data, and I agree with a lot of the positives that were shown today, I also respect the downsides and how you make your decision. Yes, the SWAC has fan energy. Yes, the MEAC has HBCU alignment. Yes, the OVC has the accessibility that it has. But here's where I land. Um, Tennessee State cannot wait on a conference move to start acting like a major football brand again. It just can't. Because before you talk about buying out of the OVC, before you talk about buying into another conference, before you talk about the SWAC, the MEAC, are going independent potentially, you have to ask one simple question. Are we maximizing what we already control? Okay. Are we maximizing what we already control? My answer to that is an emphatic no. TSU controls how it promotes its programs. TSU controls how often fans see its players. TSU controls how often fans hear from its coaches. TSU controls whether the city of Nashville sees the program as a small local team or as a major HBCU football property sitting in one of the hottest markets, sports cities in America. That is a controllable. Right now, TSU football has around 22,000 followers on Instagram, which puts them at the top of the OVC. That tells me something important. The brand is not weak. The brand is ready to actually explode. If TSU were in a SWAC, that number would put them in the conversation with schools like Southern, but still far behind the machine of what we saw Jackson State do during the Coach Prime era. But, my point is here, right? You don't need Coach Prime like energy to build momentum. You don't need that. That's a definite plus. You don't need it. What you need is from what you saw during the Coach Prime era, right? It was consistency, it was access, and it was good storytelling. You need all of that in a real content strategy of how you grow yourself. Jackson State showed the country what happens when fans get access behind the scenes. And we're talking some different styles of practice clips. We're talking player personality. They did a lot of that. Coaches talking ball, recruits seeing energy, alumni feeling connected, students feeling pride. This is not waving the magic dust over TSU. It's work. It's what it is. It's work. That's marketing. And TSU, I know TSU can do that. I know those individuals up there can do that, right? At minimum, TSU football should be marketed in 3 times a week for me, when I'm talking about true market, I'm talking about you have all this free real estate that you own and through social media and for me 3 times a week is something that you should do within your spaces here, man. And we're talking all year long. We're not just talking just in season. And the reason why I'm saying football in particular is because that's your biggest money maker outside of what you get from student fees, right? And that's at every institution, regardless of division level, right? If you got football on a division 1 level, you know, that's gonna be your biggest money maker outside of what you get from student fees. Okay. That's just what that is. Okay. So from there, uh I would ask to see more player spotlights. I would want to see more coaches' insights. I want to see some features from the brain trust behind the strength conditioning staff and the athletic training staff, right? I would want to see an incorporation of alumni storytelling and connecting with current to old, right? I want to see a Dan life, right? All of that stuff. This starts to build the story of your brand again in a space where content is just simply king. You have to play that game and you got to go hard at it. And the people who are hard at it, they're doing it every single day, giving you something every single day. And we're talking beyond sports. So that's where we are. You know, I want to see recruits understand what it means to put on that T, that S, and that U on that helmet. For me, today's college football world, if you're not telling your story daily, somebody else is just not understanding your value, right? You have to do that. And this is where TSU has to mature as a brand. You need detailed communication structures around what you're going to do for the entire year, man. Locking those major themes by the quarter, adjust every 90 days, build content around your spring ball, your summer workouts, your fall camp, your game weeks, your rivalry weeks, your senior stories, your signing day, your alumni features, your community service, your NFL pro development, right? We got guys in the UFL playing. We got coaches in the UFL, right? We got former players coaching in the NFL. We have former players representing 30 plus professional football players as financial advisors, right? We have this. So for me, we can't be random. We can't look like we're not planned. We have to be measured. And I want us to be aggressive, right? Let's get aggressive. Because right now TSU's in a difficult financial position, as we know. They're working it through. And President Tucker has is all but, turn that ship towards a space that gets us, on a great path. So a conference buyout may not be realistic today, as we've clearly seen. And if it's not realistic today, then that's okay. All right. That's okay. Because we got what we can control. But that does not mean we just sit still and just wait until once, the athletic department and the university get it figured out and they got the monies to 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 find the monies to buy out of the OVC. Okay, we can now step into the SWAC, right? Okay, now I want to support because that's not fair to them, right? They have a job to do, right? And right now they're employed to do that job. Our job as supporters are to be where we need to be, to making sure that when that time comes, we're amped and ready. Okay, we have to give them something to share and talk about, right? And go to business leaders in this national space. So we have to work through all of that stuff. We have to leverage all of that stuff right now. When you grow your digital audience now, you grow your attendance now, you grow your sponsorship interest now, you grow alumni engagement now, you make Nashville pay attention now, right? That's where we got to get to. We got to get to growing Tennessee State in Nashville even more. Then so that's where we are on that. As we look into these real powers of the conversation, as you get past that point, do we stay OVC? Uh, do we stay? Do we explore the SWAC? Do we look at the MEAC? I don't know. Or do we just seriously put independence back on the table? And I will put independence back on the table for so many reasons, right? And let me outline it like this: because TSU has a history as an independent, TSU has a national HBCU football history. It has a brand that can travel, and in the right structure, for me, independence could allow TSU to schedule HBCU opponents, create more classic style matchups. Right, so now we can actually touch some good matchups in the SWAC, some good matchups in the MEAC. Make room for one or two of those, group of five opportunities that are out there. Some Conference USA, some All American Conference, some Sun Belt, something like that, right? That's something that could put you in position to be more of a winnable game, right? That does not mean independence is easy because it's not. As I've been lining out all of this stuff, it's about the independence of what we can control from the administrator side to people like us, the former players side, and to the fan alumni side. But whatever TSU does, I would start with the John Merritt class has to become bigger in Nashville. That game should be not just another game on the schedule, as it's looked for the greater part of the last 15 years. It should be packaged as a national HBCU media property. The John Merritt Classic should be a full weekend experience, and I'm talking like football, band culture, alumni, corporate sponsors, community events, student storytelling, live broadcasts, digital content, you know, a national HBCU media coverage. That's what it should be. That is not just a game. That is your strongest asset for me. And I like to thank the folks, you all listening here and watching this would totally agree as well too. I ultimately believe Nashville's ready for that. With a city that is open and ready for and constantly shows hospitality every chance it gets. You're trying to tell me that if if the powers that be structured this the right way and presented it to the decision makers of Nashville that they couldn't get that support, a city that has Tennessee Titans, a city that has a Nashville Predators hockey, a city that has Nashville SC, a city that has Vanderbilt. I mean, this is a city that has major events, major brands, major corporations, and major media. But Tennessee State has something different, and we bring that culture, that history of legacy. The aristocrat of bands. We bring big blue country. TSU has football tradition that has helped shape what is HBCU greatness. We are one of the four originals that have shaped this. When you're talking Tennessee State, Jackson State, FAMU, Grambling, right? Me, those are the big four. Yes, South Carolina State and Southern are in there as well too, but those four, historically have been the ones that drove all of this up so high over so many years. So the issue is not whether Nashville can get behind TSU. The issue is whether TSU is ready to position itself like it belongs in the center of Nashville sports conversation, right? Let's get there. I believe it does. TSU has to stop acting small. We've acted small for the greater part of 30 some years, man. We've been good with status quo because enough has shown in spaces where we still get satisfied. And I'm just out of the position of being satisfied, right? I'm out of that. I had a conversation with a politician years ago, and it said, and what he said to me has stuck with me to this day. He said, "This is not little TSU or Northwest Nashville," and he said, "When TSU stops acting like that, you'll be surprised of what this Tennessee State University can be. This is big blue country, man." This is one of the most important HBCU athletic brands in America, sitting in one of the fastest growing sports and entertainment markets in the country. I'm gonna keep saying that. So my closing thought is very, very simple. All right. Before TSU asks whether, before TSU's fans and TSU ask whether the OVC, SWAC, MEAC, or the independent can elevate the program, TSU has to elevate how it presents itself. All right. I started this off by saying control the controllables. Tell your story. Tell it. Promote your players. Market the coaches. Package the John Merritt Classic. Own this Nashville market. Build the audience. Build the value. Then make the conference decision from a position of strength. Whatever we do, all right, I want to come from strength. I don't want to come walking out of somewhere with my tucked tail, right? I want to do the work to get it right. I'm not a person that wants to be right. I want to be in a position where we get it right. Right. So if that means if I'm wrong and all of you are right, then we're going to go with that. We're not trying to find a way to make Reno right. It's about how do we as an institution and that supports it get right. The next chapter of TSU football should not be about where TSU is allowed to fit, man. It's not. It should be about TSU deciding how big it is ready to become. And in my opinion, it's time for Big Blue to start acting like Big Damn Blue. That's it. See y'all next time on Indy Period.